still lost. But yet instead, Roses had a housing officer, Michelle Bell. She's supposed to be with housing, she's supposed to prevent me from being housing, and she did nothing. Now I'm in the street. And now I have to go soon because I got to get a bed at Roses. But everybody's supposed to feel safe. You ain't supposed to have guns pulled on you. But this victory program, they put them homeless people out of the storage, and I got the same one. And on top of it, I had to see Tammy, the director, when I go to the homeless clinic to try to get my medicine. There she is. They need to fire her. They don't deserve this kind of stuff. I'm 61 years old. I couldn't even have my grandkids no more. I deserve to be treated like a person. You're supposed to have faith in the justice system.
Ma'am, I just want to make sure that
I understand, but I had to get my point across. I'm diabetic. I'm getting sick.
Okay.
But I reached out to Kim Janey's office, Mr. McFadden, the mayor's office right back there.
Thank you.
I just wanted y'all to hear my story.
Thank you
very much. Thank you.
So the next three, Stephen Jones, Melinda Stewart, Calvin Mack. Stephen Jones, Melinda Stewart, Calvin Mack. Go ahead.
If I was able to run up here, I would have ran up here because that's how bad I wanted to get up here to be able to speak. I'm listening and I hear what they're saying. I hear what Miss Gloria was just stating. And gotta say, what Miss Gloria experienced is what one have done. And that's nothing. Watch one suffer. Go through the suffering. Watch one be dragged through the courts to represent themselves, to save a roof over their heads. It have caused this, whatever you call this, I don't know when it started, but people keep telling me this has been going on for years. I said, where I been? Where I been? Then I thought about it. 1999, I lost my mother behind the same thing, and it's repeating itself. I'm on my 4th eviction, 2 evictions in the SJC court. I fought for 2 whole years, back and forth, every week in the courts. Boston Housing, no one was in my best interests. And I am not just a voice for myself, for many more, because I had to take on the responsibility to intervene and do interventions in one that also experiencing the same thing. So sometimes at night I had to stay up all night trying to calm down one who's ready to take their lives over a roof over their heads. And one's not caring. You can tell us, you can send us, we can bang on all doors, and every door that we was sent to closed or never opened. So I just want to make room. I just want to state this. Yeah, this is just the beginning, because we were no longer going to sit down on this anymore. So we appreciate this meeting, and we are looking forward for more our leaders to be with there, not just you all. Thank you all.
Thank you. And before folks speak again, if we could just state your name so I know
I'm
that.
sorry. Yes, I would definitely. Melinda Stewart. I ran for state rep in 2016. And that's when I went under attack. Roof taking over my head. 8 years being the best tenant. So I just want to leave it as that, because if you want to hear more about the cases, it's on the SJC webpage. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Calvin Mack. I lived in Boston, a black community, my whole entire life. I'm 52 years in age, and I just wanted to bring a little light on Ms. Stewart's situation, because when she ran for 5th District State Rep, I was there getting those 200 and I think 50 signatures for her, and we got on the board. I seen her help many people in the community, and as far as a landlord, he lives on, well, he have a place on Julian Street. It's a drug infested, people get robbed, mugged, all kind of stuff around her area. This little short woman right here, she stuck up for that man. Even when he wasn't on his premises, she made sure people don't smoke crack, shoot dope, do epinoids, all kind of stuff in that nature. And then all of a sudden, his attitude changed towards her. I seen him mentally torment this woman because she has a disability, high anxiety. And let me tell you what happened. She called, I know I only got 2 minutes so I can make it strong. She called me one day, she said, Calvin, get to my house, I really need you. I runs down there, let me tell you what I saw. I seen a constable, I seen the police, I think it was a sergeant or supervisor there, and the landlord. Miss Stewart's in tears. So I ran up to her, I said, Melinda, what's going on here? She said, Calvin, she said, I went to housing court yesterday. The judge supposed to review my case. This landlord don't supposed to be on my premises right now trying to legally evict me. So I said, well, did he show you any paperwork? She said, he just showed me a piece of paper, but that was it. I said, what'd the court say? She said, I haven't called the court. So I suggested her to call the court, talk to the clerk, find what's going on. She called down the clerk's office. The clerk looked at her case and even said, this guy shouldn't be doing what he's doing. He wouldn't talk to Ms. Stewart. He wouldn't take her phone and talk to the clerk. So the clerk asked me to advocate for Ms. Stewart. I think it was Bruce Efron, the landlord. So anyway, I gave the phone to Mr. Bruce Efron. He told the lady, she do what she got to do. He's going to do what he got to do. So at that point in time, he was walking away from the phone. So she yelled out. She said, sir, I'm going to give you a verbal order to leave this woman premises alone. She's going to come down to court. I'm going to give her the proper documentation, so leave her alone. I gave her cab fare. She went in the cab. I went to stand by her premises, and they made me feel unwelcome, unwanted. Only thing I was trying to do was be a brother sticking up for a sister that I seen unjustifiably wrong. And I even seen, as I can recall, I'm trying to make this very quick because I know a lot of people want to get their voices heard. Yeah. So I seen a constable assault this woman. I seen a police officer assault this woman. And this woman's still standing here before me with no justice but eviction.
Thank you.
All right, have a nice day.
You wanted to do some quick response to anything that you've heard while they're, oh, I'm sorry. I have a Stephen Jones?
Right, but he's not here. I'm Sharon Jones, and I figured if I don't speak now, I may not get an opportunity. So if I may, please.
I actually think we should go in order, the way people signed up.
I don't think Stephen's here.
Okay, then I would pick then Juanita McCoy, who's in order. I'm sorry. Juanita signed up. I'm going to go in order the way people signed up. I'm not going to apologize for that. If Juanita is not here, then I have... Okay, great. Come and please testify. Come and testify.
I'm here.
Come and
talking
testify.
about gentrification. My name is Juanita McCoy. I live at 102 Elm Hill Ave, and I have fought to stay there for 30 years. My Section 8 is soon going to expire, and we have been fighting to stay there. We do thank God for the Mass Alliance of HUD tenants because it was able to take me to Washington, D.C. to advocate and fight for our housing where I live. It's 247 apartments there, and pretty soon, and right now we are having so many inspections. We're having people from all other areas coming in, looking, and then inspecting our apartments. I had inspection last week, an inspection the weeks and couple of weeks before that, and we're just being inspected and inspected and inspected. People are coming in, checking out where we live. Where we live is a very prime area where we live because of course the Franklin Park, it's Elm Hill Ave, it's Seaver Street, it's Nazine Street, it's Hutchinson Street, it's Brookledge Ave. All these streets are connected with, our owner is Peabody, used to be owned by Benchmark, but that at that time, a lot of things was happening. But staying on the subject, thank you, 1 minute, okay. Staying on the subject, we need to keep this apartment, these buildings that we live in that are Section 8 subsidized buildings. We need to keep them affordable. And it's important to keep the affordability Okay, so we may be protected for 40 years, but after 40 years, then what? But I'm seeing in my area where I live, a lot of people are moving in. And when they're moving in from outside, these buildings are becoming condominiums. Condominium is on the rise. It's on Humboldt Ave. It's where they're on Brookledge. Condominiums are coming. Condominiums are coming. They're on Humboldt Ave. They're being built, and we're being pushed out. But we need to remain. I've been living in this area. I'm 60 years old. I've been living in this area. My brother brought me here when I was 3, okay? So I've been here 57 years, but we're being slowly pushed out. And we need to be protected and stay and remain protected. Thank you very much, and God bless all y'all that are here, even the community. Thank you for letting us speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Juanita.
Juanita. Thank you, Juanita. Okay, yeah. 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 Do you want to? Do you want a new panel? So I just want to recognize City Councilor at Large, Michelle Wu, has joined us. Do you want to move on to the next panel or have them respond?
Well, right. No, I want them to be able to respond.
Okay. 3 more folks. You guys can have some brief response, and then we'll move on to the next panel. Or would you go ahead?
No, I was just looking at Michael trying to figure out which development that is. It expires in 2024. What? Okay, so we'll look into that and contact the owner. I mean, like I mentioned in my remarks, as much as we're trying to create new, we always got to be looking in the rearview mirror and make sure that we preserve that affordable housing that we have. We won't get it back, so we absolutely need to make sure it's affordable in perpetuity.
Thank you. Bill, did you want to address anything you heard?
Yeah, I wanted to briefly respond to some of the inquiries about Lennox Camden. First and foremost, we've had well over a dozen meetings in that community with the residents. One as recently as a few weeks ago. We continue to meet with the residents and the tenant task force out there to make sure that we are providing them with accurate information. The speaker is absolutely correct. The conditions at Lennox Camden are horrendous, which is precisely why we're doing what we're doing. We will be investing about $120,000, $130,000 in each and every one of the 357 deeply affordable public housing units in that community. We will begin the work on the Camden side early next year in 2019. Nobody will be required to move off-site, although we'll be renovating bathrooms, kitchens, and upgrading the interior of the unit. So obviously people can't live there while we're doing that kind of rehabilitation. We will relocate people temporarily in hotel units on the site and then pay for that relocation and then move them back. They will be able to move back to the unit that they came from if they are appropriately sized for their families. If they are overhoused now, for example, and they are in a 4-bedroom and only need a 2-bedroom, they will be moved back to a 2-bedroom so that we can make available a 4-bedroom unit for a family that is on our waiting list or is in that development that is underhoused. But we have a commitment to making sure everybody there stays on site, even during the renovation, and can move back to their specific unit if they're appropriately housed. The 357 units there that are there now will continue to be deeply affordable. Folks will continue to pay 30% of their income for rent, as they do now, as established by federal law. They will continue to have all of the appropriate grievance procedures that they have now based on federal law. So in my view, what we're doing there is upgrading a community that's in badly in need of investment, and we will do that, and we'll preserve those units for existing residents and for future residents of Roxbury that need deeply affordable housing. And I'll leave a card, and I'll speak with the woman. I don't know where she went, so that we can. I'll give you my card. We've met before at meetings. I'll give her my card, and we'll be able to talk to her on an individual basis.
Thank you.
Can any of you talk about how many units in Boston, particularly in Roxbury, we're looking at in terms of expiring use? Like, what are we in danger of losing in terms of our housing stock and keeping it affordable? And then what actions, because we want to make sure that this is focused on solutions moving forward. What actions do we need to take to make sure that they stay affordable?
I do have that. I can come back to that. I just want to make sure I got my numbers right. I did bring that tonight, though, so.
Excellent, I do appreciate it, thank you.
We'll call up.
Yeah, so just moving on the list, I have Rachel Burke, Danielle Mandola, Corinna Andrews. Are 3 here? Okay, because I'm going to keep going through the list until we have 3 standing at the mic.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Andrews.
Ms. Andrews, before you start, I'm going to call up another 2 people after. No, please stay there. I'm going to make sure I have 3 people there. So I have but Danielle Mendola and Rachel Berg are not here. I'm just calling your name one last time because I'm going to keep moving on this list. I also have Cheryl Spence and Mark Dresden. Okay. Ms. Andrews.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karina Andrews. I would also like to thank Councilor Jennings for coming to one of our tenants meetings. At this time, I'm a stabilization worker in the Boston area. I deal with clients who were in shelter programs that moved into their apartments, and my job is to make sure that they stay permanently housed. Okay, so it's just going to be brief. I just want you to take into consideration that the 2 barriers that the clients are now having. The first one is the rent that is being increased every other year from landlords. And the second thing is background checks and credit checks. It's making it very difficult for some people who, had bad credits. So that means you're unable to be housed because of bad credits. I would like you during one of your meetings to take that into consideration. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Ms. Spence?
Cheryl Spence, 33 Montrose Street in Roxbury. What I'm going to be speaking about is a case study on upzoning and the lack of the voice of the abutters to be heard in front of the ZBA during the appeal process. So this is regarding 33 Copeland Street. The plan submitted by the developer for the vacant parcel needed significant zoning relief consisting of 9 variants because the plan is out of scale with the existing neighborhood. The Moreland Street Historic District is a 3-family district, but the project is 8 units, making the project overcrowded on the lot and removing most of the trees. Multifamily homes like this are of forbidden use in Moreland Street Historic District. When the developer bought the property, it consisted of 2 lots that were combined. The Copeland Street parcel has no address in the city's system and does not meet the minimum frontage requirements on a public street. To approve design submitted by the developer, it would mean allowing 8 units to be built behind someone else's home. That's like putting a home in the middle of a baseball diamond is basically what it is. We also sent photos to the city so they could see why the abutters were concerned. The BPDA disapproved these plans for a multifamily home, which should have been it. It should have ended there. But instead of granting the abutters their request for a deferral of the hearing, the ZBA approved a plan for luxury condos. The developer has said that the selling price will be between $600,000 to $700,000. Many residents living around the property could be displaced as a result. A more reasonable design was needed here, one that takes into account the existing neighborhood. Councilors Flaherty and Wu both opposed the project, supporting the abutters and asking for a deferral. One member of the ZBA opposed. 17 abutters signed a letter in opposition. 3 neighborhood associations, 9th Street Neighborhood Association, Alaska Perrin Street, and Roxbury Path Forward Neighborhood Association all opposed the project, asking for more time to resolve abutter concerns. All of our letters were ignored or not acknowledged. No material changes were ever made by the developer. It was a process without support for residents because the project kept moving forward. It will always be a process without accountability unless the District 7 councilor supports community residents. The Zoning Board of Appeal ignored abutters' call to defer the project and flagrantly ignored community concerns. This proposal flies in the face of the type of neighborhood we are trying to retain in Roxbury, one where the owner of a single condominium apartment is treated with the same fairness and respect given to a developer controlling many properties. The developer stated publicly at more than one meeting his plans to make extensive repairs to a retaining wall which runs along a section of the property.
Ms.
The
Spence,
retaining wall...
2 minutes have gone up. If it's written testimony, you can also submit that as well if you'd like to wrap up.
I get the same thing at the ZBA when I'm asked to take a day off of work and go down there and testify. I get the same thing. Shut up and move on.
I did not say that. Well,
That's
so
how
I
I
apologize
feel.
if you took
That's
it
how
that
I
way.
feel. I feel that my voice is never heard. It's always cut off.
So
But yet
if you have written
invite me here.
testimony, you can also submit that as well. And I would encourage for anyone else who's going to be reading from written testimony, because of our time constraints, for you to summarize the testimony and to submit the actual written product to the City Council. Mark? Mark?
Thank you very much, councilors. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for holding this hearing on this extraordinarily important issue. For the record, my name is Mark Drayson. I'm a resident of Roslindale, where I've lived for the last 47 years. I'm also the executive director of the Regional Planning Agency for Greater Boston, which is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC. Because time is short, I'm only going to hit a few points. We have a very substantial housing practice at MAPC. We consider it to be one of the most important issues facing the city, the inner core, and the entire region. We work on anti-displacement issues both through research and through public policy on a municipal level and at the state level as well. Our focus is really in the housing arena on developing additional housing to meet the growing need of the metropolitan area, making sure that as high a percentage of that as possible is affordable, and I mean really affordable, making sure that we preserve existing affordable units, as has been mentioned several times, is absolutely critical. And we have a special concern about...
No, sorry. No, continue.
Okay.
I apologize. Wrong.
It was fast,
1
but
minute.
I didn't think
No,
it was
well,
that
no,
fast,
you have 1
Council.
minute. I
Right,
apologize.
okay.
Sorry.
And we have a special concern about also producing and maintaining units for people with disabilities of various kinds. I would say just a couple of critical things to keep in mind. 3. 1, everyone needs to build additional housing, and especially affordable housing. Every neighborhood in Boston, every city and town in the inner core, every suburb throughout the greater Boston region. Boston can't do it alone. No one can do it alone. We need to do it regionally. That's why we were very pleased that the Metro Mayors Coalition, including Mayor Walsh, recently agreed to commit themselves to 185,000 units of production between 2015 and 2030. But I won't be satisfied with that until every community makes a local commitment. Secondly, there are many important pieces of legislation on the Hill on this issue, but I think one of the most important ones is the right of counsel for eviction proceedings. That has been shown to have a real meaningful impact on whether people lose their homes. And so we all have to work on that. And then I would end by saying something that Councilor Flaherty said, almost took the words right out of my mouth. We in this state need an adult conversation on rent control, eviction control, and condominium conversion control. I was a member of the legislature when the referendum took place that stripped us of that. Whatever faults, difficulties, or limitations there may have been in that system, we are trying to fight this housing crisis with the regulatory hand tied behind our backs. And to do it by production alone, we must produce, but it's not sufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm going to hand out some material on evictions.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you give it to Ron.
Sheila, you had a quick response, and then we're going to call up the next panel.
No, I just want to thank Mark for his work. So I just want to get back to you on the expiring use issue, Counselor, if that's still, or I can give you a full report too on the units, but just generally, there's over 10,000 affordable units in Roxbury. 8,000 of those are privately owned, so we always watch those. They're not publicly owned.
Repeat that.
Sorry. There's over 10,000 affordable units in Roxbury. Over 8,000 of those are privately owned, so those are the ones that we monitor with Michael Kane and the Head Tenant Alliance and others. almost 4,700 are at limited risk because they're owned by nonprofits, but we monitor those as well. 3,200 are preserved for very, very long periods of time, past 2030. 66 right now are at elevated risk. So what I think I need to do is give the council and anyone who wants that report, more detailed information about the projects, who the owners are, their affordability terms, and I'll commit to doing that this week.
I appreciate that. And just quickly, you heard the last speaker offer some concrete solutions around some of the things to watch. One thing that he said, and I've heard people in the administration say, Boston can't do it alone, that we've got to make sure that other towns do their share in terms of affordable housing, and they haven't been. How do we do that, though, and make sure that as new people are flooding into Boston, that they don't look like the residents who are already in our community, which is very diverse, and that housing out in the suburbs or surrounding towns is where folks from Roxbury end up getting pushed up. So if just briefly, I know you all have to go, and I really appreciate your flexibility.
I'm
if you can speak to that piece.
Yeah,
that's
no,
why
I just want folks to know that when we do build new affordable housing in the city, Boston residents, we can't give neighborhood preference, but Boston residents do get preference for those units, which is really important. Because as others, I agree, as other cities and towns don't build affordable housing, more and more people are coming to Boston, and it's, you know, no fault of their own. They're desperate also to house their families. Right now in our individual shelters, between 50 and 60% of the individuals coming into shelter because they're seeking affordable housing and services are from outside of Boston. So we really, really do need other cities and towns to step up and create at least, you know, Boston's about 20% affordable overall, Roxbury's 50, but, you know, there's cities and towns that have 2 and 3%, and it's not right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling up the next
Thank
panel,
you.
I have Richard Zhuang from the Action for Communities, staff attorney for the Action for Communities Environment, Jeanette Callahan from Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, Michael Kane, the executive director of the Mass Alliance of HUD Tenants, Donna King from the Mass Affordable Housing Alliance, and Jessica Peer from Inequality Media Specialists Institute for Policy Studies. While they're coming up, we're going to keep moving down this list. I have Lauren Thompson, Kimberly Isles, and Robert Pitts. Are you Lauren Thompson? Okay. Okay, so I have Lauren Thompson, who's deferred her time, and then I also have Kimberly Isles and Robert Pitts. I have Isles. I-Y-L-E-S. Iles, Isles, and Robert Pitts. So for Lauren Thompson, there's going to be a testimony. I'm sorry, what was her name? No, we're not going to have people repeat before someone has spoken at all.
She's finishing her testimony.
She was.
She's not repeating. I'm allowing.
You can submit it in writing.
2, 3, 4, 5. I have 50 people signed up to speak who have not been heard at all. 50 people plus this. I'm so sorry. I'm going to, if you're going to defer your time, I'm going to defer it to someone who's signed up to speak, who has not spoken yet. So if Lauren Thompson, if you're going to move on your time, then fine, I will call. Kimberly Isles is here or not? Lyles. I have Isles, I-Y-L-E-S. No. I have I-Y-L-E-S. So are you, if you feel it, go ahead. Fine. If you're Kimberly Isles, Robert Pitts, he's not here, we're moving on. I have Lucille Jones. Okay, Amanda Govan, and then Will Justice. Is Will Justice here?
Yep, he's here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Lyle, and I live on Clifford Street. And I want to talk a little bit about the perspective of being a younger Roxbury resident, because I feel like we get left out of the conversation, so I'll read my prepared remarks. Everyone knows that Boston needs more housing, but Boston's need for housing should not and will not continue to come at the disparate expense of Roxbury's residents. If the current pace of predatory and exclusionary development that prioritizes the desires of newer, wealthier, and quite frankly, whiter residents over the needs of blacker, lesser moneyed, lesser privileged folks who have made Roxbury a place that people would want to flock to, well, if this continues, it poses a great threat to the essence of the Roxbury community, and we know what is happening to us. 2 months ago, one of my younger cousins moved to Taunton. She and her spouse could no longer afford to live here with their young child. Earlier this year, another cousin, a single mother, moved to go live in an affordable unit in Avon. And before her, yet another cousin moved to Randolph. Where is the housing for them? Where is the housing that allows Roxbury's own to remain in Roxbury? Roxbury's young people cannot benefit from the gains our foremothers and forefathers endured so much to obtain for us. Our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents survived redlining, white flight, busing, disinvestment, urban renewal, and other attacks to remain in the community and to make a place for us here. And that is being threatened by every variance given despite strong resident opposition. It is being threatened by every micro unit and every studio apartment being shoved down our throats that will be leased for as much as $3,000 a month. Here are a few ways you can support Roxbury's young people in building futures here. Support and help to implement a moratorium on the disposition of public land in Roxbury. Listen to the community to hear, understand, and apply what we're saying, and not just because you're or when you're running for election. We have said we want a moratorium. Please do not dismiss us. Stop ignoring abutters, and more importantly, stop being duplicitous. Take legislative action to rescind questionable variances, stop upzoning, amend Article 50 to set limits for upzoning, support homeownership programs, and base affordability in Roxbury based on Roxbury incomes, not just the AMI. Thank you, and we expect to have your support.
Thank you very much. Amanda, Robert?
Good evening, City Councilor Janey, city officials, developers, constituents of Roxbury. I am Ms. Govan, a college graduate, medical office professional, and a single mother of two. Just straighten this out, I'm kind of short. I lived all over the city of Boston, greater Boston area, and Metro West. I lived in other parts of the country as well, but Roxbury is my home and I am native to this area. Roxbury raised me. I have many good times growing up. Remember block parties from Lenox Street to West Newton Street where my grandmother used to live. As a young girl, I felt welcome and safe. That solid sense of community we had back then still exists within the inner city Roxbury today. During the 11 years I lived away from Boston, I used to dream about the elevated Orange Line and Tremont Street vividly. I missed the sense of community I had and how close everything was. I used to live in South Carolina for about a good 4 years, and everybody that lived down south knows that the corner store is not at the corner, it's 5 miles down the road. In early 2000, I made it back to my beloved Roxbury and now live in Lenox Street with my daughters. Since arriving back, I've been envisioning and building a future here for them, but I can't help to feel uneasy because I don't feel generational security is something that I can give them like I once had. I worry that in a few years, because of all the developments coming into Roxbury and the rising cost of rent that come along with it, I will be priced out. I don't want to leave Roxbury, and I really love to plant my roots and have a positive influence and a positive contribution to my community. Generational security should be for all, everyone in here, not just a select few. I would be devastated I couldn't live here in Roxbury, and it matters to me that there is a future for my daughters in Roxbury specifically. I would like for them to have choices and opportunities like I had, to go anywhere in the world as they may want, but know that they can and will be able to call one place home, which is Roxbury, Massachusetts. From growing up here in the 80s to seeing what the city of Boston has become now, from me traveling to Trinidad and from me living down south, I would love to know that I will feel that I am a part of the growth of this city and not shut out from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Justice?
Peace. So I'm Will Justice, Reclaim Roxbury, new organizer for T-Riders Union, and we don't feel like y'all are hearing us, especially when we're saying that we have other people that are speaking for us, and you're not even letting them speak. So, you know what I'm saying, we kind of feeling a little bit disrespected over here, you know what I'm saying, and you in our neighborhood, and don't forget that, you in our neighborhood. So it's like, we feel as though we're taking ownership of our neighborhood, and the people that are coming in are literally sitting there telling us you can't speak when it is our neighborhood, all right? So this is the, this is like the new white trains, the highway system coming through, because before we had to fight with the highways and everything like that, you know what I'm saying, historically, You know, so our housing situation, if you go to, on Thursday, you go to housing court, it is packed full of people that look like me. Yet you bring in people in who don't look like me that are willing to pay that capital. So if it's like money rules. You know what I'm saying? So basically what you're telling us is that you don't value us, you value that money that's coming in. You know what I'm saying? So what we're seeing is, and you talk about some, you're not really selling the parcels, and you're the people are misrepresenting the AMI and all that stuff. I don't know anybody that's filled out those censuses like that, sit there and speak about their income and what have you. So these are dishonest AMIs. We're literally dealing with, especially with the transportation, we're looking at the money being deferred to places that already have money. We have 30,000 people a day coming through Dudley, and we are seeing no improvements whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? Since that L went up, and we got the Silver Line talk about some 30, like, equal, or, you know what I'm saying? What was that saying? Equal or better transit, and we're not getting none of that. Like, this is like, we feel like, you know what I'm saying, this is like a little show, a pony and dance show, and we're not seeing any effectiveness. We need y'all to step up and do what you actually say that you're gonna do, and stop with the lies, for real though.
So now we're going to turn to our panel testimony to allow for the panelists to speak, each one getting 5 minutes to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Honorable Councillors, thank you for holding this hearing. Obviously, gentrification and displacement are critical and indeed crisis issues. My name is Richard Zwang. I'm the staff attorney for Alternatives for Community Environment. We are a long-standing community organization working for the health and well-being of Roxbury. Normally, as a staff attorney, my job is to talk about evidence and the law, and I will certainly do that today, but I also want to start on a personal note. I'm an Asian American lawyer working for a person of color-led organization deep in the heart of the African American community of Roxbury. It is a pleasure and an honor to serve the African American community in Roxbury because this is a community of racial inclusion, and that history and reality of racial inclusiveness is something that should be cherished and preserved for generations to come. It's in that light that I would like to reframe some of this discussion in terms of racial justice, civil rights, and public health with clearly racialized dimensions. The current proposals to improve housing, while very well to increase the quantity of housing in the city, are of course welcome, but they are insufficient. And I want to direct the council's attention to many of the tools it may have at its disposal to mitigate and reduce displacement and gentrification in our communities. First, some of the evidence. In August 2016, Professor James Jennings, Mr. Bob Terrell, who spoke earlier, and other community leaders issued a study that suggested that there's a disproportionate displacement of African Americans and other racial minorities from the city compared to comparable white households. In January 2018, a study conducted by Dr. Megan Sandell of Boston Medical Center and published by the American Academy of Pediatrics indicated that the mental and physical health of children is adversely affected when there is a family experience of 2 or more instances of displacement within 1 year, and adversely affected when a family experiences undue financial strain due to not being able to make rent. In April 2018, an economic modeling study conducted under the auspices of the Federal Reserve indicated that rents do not tend to decline in urban centers such as Boston, despite modest increases in housing supply. So rents tend to ratchet up and stay up. In short, we have at our disposal an accumulation of research that underscores people's lived experiences of gentrification and displacement. There is research that tells us that there is indeed a racial bias in patterns of displacement, that there is indeed adverse health consequences that arise from displacement, and that it is in fact not the case that simply building new apartments will reduce financial stress and vulnerability due to evictions because of rising rents. In light of this well-documented crisis, then, ACE has a set of recommendations that we believe are squarely within the city's and BPDA's power to address critical civil rights issues and critical racial justice issues. We support the moratorium that many people have mentioned, and we support it at a minimum for the duration of time that it takes for DND to complete its affirmatively furthering fair housing study. This is a study required under HUD regulations under the Obama administration. The Trump administration has since then essentially discontinued it, but DND has committed to completing it, to its credit. We wish to note, however, that that study should be conducted with the involvement, not in isolation from BPDA, and should also consider the implications of a variety of interdisciplinary and cross-sectional issues, including, for example, the need to improve transit and transit conditions in this and transit access in the city. The city has already taken an important step by adopting the Youth Pass, and we suggest that it move its focus away simply from traffic congestion to actually economic mobility. Furthermore, we support the many of the proposals that have been stated, recalculating affordability restrictions, more community land trusts, and most importantly, we think the city must create and fund a mechanism for ongoing monitoring and compliance of anti-displacement and inclusion plans that should be conducted not by BPDA alone, but by third parties or a dedicated city agency. The bottom line is this: gentrification and displacement as they currently manifest in Boston have clearly racial implications, and luckily Boston knows the tools that it has at its disposal to address those racial disparities. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Callahan? No, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Jessica Pierre, and I am a local resident. I live right off of Dudley Street, and I am also here representing the Institute for Policy Studies located in Jamaica Plain. This past summer, we launched our luxury real estate project in an effort to map the trends at the intersection of global hidden wealth and local real estate and luxury housing. We all know that Boston is experiencing a luxury real estate housing boom. But with Bostonians having a median household income of $58,000, we at the Institute for Policy Studies decided to look into these luxury condos to see who's really buying Boston. In September, we published a study called Towering Excess: The Perils of the Luxury Real Estate Boom for Bostonians. Our research began by looking at 12 of the highest priced and presently occupied luxury housing developments constructed in Boston over the last decade. This totaled to about 1,800 units with the average price of $3 million, a price 50 times higher than Boston's median household income. We found that of these 18,000 luxury units, 64% do not claim a residential exemption. This is an indication that the condo owners are not using these units as their primary residence. Over 35% of these units are owned by LLCs and trusts that obscure the real owners and beneficiaries. Almost 40% of the LLCs owning Boston luxury properties have organized themselves in the state of Delaware, the premier secrecy jurisdiction in the United States. Among these properties owned by LLCs and shell corporations, a large number of these properties are purchased through cash transactions, greatly increasing the risk that the properties involved are being used to launder money from criminal activities and speed capital flight. These red flag transactions demonstrate how Boston's luxury housing market is playing a key role in the global hidden wealth infrastructure, a shadowy system that's hiding wealth and masking ownership, all for the purpose of helping the holders of private fortunes avoid taxes and oversight of illicit activities. I'm here to make it very clear that this is not your local gentrification. This is supercharged gentrification, and we have global wealth hitting the city of Boston right now. Boston's past and current city administrations have permitted this explosion of luxury real estate construction in the city. And while there are obvious benefits, such as providing good jobs in building trades and increasing property tax revenue for the city, our report has identified a number of perils that the city has yet to look into. These include driving up the cost of land in central neighborhoods, exacerbating Boston's already grotesque inequality of income, wealth, and opportunity, implications on our climate, and corruption between government oversight bodies and luxury developers, and so much more. Boston can do a lot more to protect the public interest and in the process capture some of the current luxury real estate wealth flow to support affordable housing for Boston residents. Our recommendations include a real estate transfer tax. Boston should tax real estate transactions on properties selling over $2.5 million and dedicate revenue to the city's affordable housing linkage fund. Boston can also pass a vacancy tax. This city could discourage high-end vacant properties by taxing buildings that sit empty for more than 6 months a year. We also recommend that the city increase disclosure measures. Boston should require property owners, as part of recording deeds, to disclose the actual human being who owns the property. We should explore what we like to call the Boston Public Library test. In order to get a Boston Public Library card, you have to provide proof of who you are and where you live. We should have the same standard for buying real estate in Boston. Thank you.
So my name is Jeanette Callahan. I am a resident of Roxbury. And I tell you, after living and raising a family with 4 children and going, I guess, to about 12 apartments before I finally bought my own home, I'm telling you, we need to have home ownership be an option for way more people than it is now. I'm also a pediatrician, so I understand the impact of residential instability on children, and it's something that they live with. It adjusts their genetics. It's not just that they have to move and pack their things. It actually adjusts their genetics. And if you look at the studies, we are generationally influencing and impacting our young people going forward by not having the kind of stability in our neighborhood that we need, that we deserve. I thank you all for actually calling this meeting and calling it at night so that we can get here and so that we can actually hear what the people of Roxbury have to say. I welcome all of the comments that I've heard thus far from my neighbors. So I'm here also representing GBIO, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. It's a citizens' power organization with about 43 member organizations throughout Greater Boston, primarily interfaith and churches, but some unions as well, and some other CDCs. And we represent about 35,000 plus people among all of our membership. And we have been working really, really hard to address this crisis. Boston is the most unequal city in the U.S. The top 5% of earners average $266,224 a year, compared to the $14,925 earned by those in the bottom 20%. This disparity is stark along the racial line. White households in the Boston metropolitan area have a median net worth of over $250,000, while black households have a median net worth of just $8. And if you combine the Latino community with the black, we're talking zero in terms of overall net worth. Boston's being transformed into a city for the wealthy. It's being transformed into a city where not only working poor, but even middle-class families can no longer afford to live here. The actual workers of our city, the workforce, the folks that make this city run, school teachers, can't live here. The trends are radiating outward to the whole metropolitan area. With this growing inequality of income and wealth comes a paralleled inequality of access, influence, and decision-making power. So part of what GBIO is doing, one of our main things, that we want to shift the power in this place. We want to shift the balance of power so that Boston can actually remain vibrant, diverse, the way that we need it to be to make Boston a place that's really livable, and that's safe, and that's healthy. During this powerful economic boom, and partly because of it, we are facing this housing affordability emergency for both rentals and home ownership. Now, I know that there's often a conflict a little bit between whether we have more rental units, whether we push for home ownership. I respect every battle that gets this place affordable. I respect all of the various ways that we can do it. However, we actually believe that if we can move folks from renting to home ownership, it actually will free up more affordable, potentially affordable rental units. So what we're trying to do in GBIO is to focus our efforts on increasing affordable home ownership. Unfortunately, home ownership is out of the reach for way too many, and this is more diagnosis. As a doctor, I always hate it when people diagnose, and then don't have a prescription. So I'm going to jump down because we've heard a lot of the diagnosis already that it's unaffordable. But I do want to note that the racial disparity, people don't want to talk about it, frankly, but it's real. The racial home ownership gap tells us that 44% of white folks who are living in their residence, they own that. Only 29% for black households and 16% for Latino households. So if you're black or Latino, achieving home ownership is both simultaneously more difficult and more important. So what can we do? How much time do I have? 30 seconds, you're kidding me. Seriously? So GBIO and MAHA, we've been working along with D&D actually, and we have a good partnership. We've been talking about this problem, and we have committed to seeing 200 new homeowners per year over the next 5 years. And the idea would be to buy down the mortgage interest rates to 2%. And we are actually glad to see that this is in the 2030 housing plan as two of the top action steps. And I'm sorry, GBIO had a lot to do with that conversation. That was not on the table before. And in partnership with lenders like Mass Housing and Mass Housing Partnership, we want to produce more products like that that people can afford. We also want to, encourage the city to go after linkage and pilot these large universities that charge umpteen dollars for their students to go. They have something called a payment in lieu of taxes. Let's get that payment and put it towards affordable homeownership. So as a whole, we think that we're going to need about $50 million over the course of 5 years to put 1,000 folks into homes over the next 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean that it all comes from Boston. We know that. I know my time's up. However, we need to hit the state funding, okay? We need to be very aggressive about it and look for new additional resources for home ownership. MAHA, we're working with very closely, and they're going to talk a little bit more about some specifics. But I do want you to know that GBIO fought for $3 million from that big developer that is building on top of the Back Bay, Boston Properties. We said, look, you can't build it, and we're not going to stop meeting with you until you pay back to the community. And so $3 million sits in some fund that's going to go towards home ownership, and that's because we fought, and I know that you and I can fight together to make this happen.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this hearing and for allowing me to speak. My name is Donna King. I am renting on Parkview Street. I would love to purchase my own home. I am representing MAHA, which is the Mass Affordable Housing Alliance, and our Expand the Pie campaign in Boston. MAHA works with a broad group of housing and community-based organizations to promote the production and preservation of every type of affordable housing. Our focus within these coalitions is breaking down barriers for low and moderate income first-time homebuyers, and especially for first-generation homebuyers. We've been serving roughly 900 people per year in our home ownership classes. We expect that to grow to 1,300 in the coming year. In 2017, 74% of our class participants were people of color. That percentage has been consistent over many years. Reducing the racial home ownership gap, helping Black, Latino, and Asian homeowners to become the first in their families to own a home is critical for many reasons. Stopping gentrification and displacement is one of them. Roxbury, a neighborhood who only 22% of the households own their housing, is especially vulnerable to forces of gentrification and mass eviction. Increasing the number of low, moderate, and middle-income Black, Latino, and Asian homeowners should be part of our defense against wholesale change in who can live here. We want to thank Councilor Janey and Councilor Edwards and 7 other councilors who attended our Expanding the Pie campaign kickoff in June, where we all committed to a goal of 1,000 truly affordable home ownership opportunities in Boston. My testimony today will update you on the different pieces of that campaign stand and what we are asking the council and the mayor to partner with us to do. We do not have anywhere close to the amount of public money that it would take to stop wide-scale displacement in Roxbury and other neighborhoods. We want to increase public sector investment and capture the maximum amount of profit from luxury development and use it for affordable housing. 3 steps the city should take immediately. First is linkage. We must move now to increase fees on large-scale commercial developments such as office buildings and hotels. The current fee is $10.81 per square foot for each square foot above 100,000 square feet threshold. We want to increase it to 24 per square foot. We very much appreciate Councilor Janey for coming to Maha last month to discuss this proposal and the Nexus study commissioned by the BPDA that supports it. This change will bring millions of additional dollars for affordable housing and job training in Boston, while unduly burdening developers, investors, or prospective commercial tenants. The study shows that the projected impacts on these groups would be extremely small. It would not reduce Boston's competitiveness relative to nearby developmental locations. We hope the council and the mayor will work with Maha and other stakeholders to enact linkage changes immediately. Right now, all but the, okay. Secondary, we're talking about the IDP, the institutionary development. The development should benefit everybody in Boston. All new housing should include higher percentage of affordable housing or larger cash payments to the Neighborhood Housing Trust. Thank you, Councilor Janey, for talking about this with Maha constituents in District 7 and for initiating a sign-on letter for city councilors to BPA Director Brian Golden. And the third is pilot. And pilot is, Maha is a part of the pilot action group. We believe universities and hospitals should pay their fair share. Here in Roxbury, Northeastern keeps growing. And to this date, they are millions of dollars behind in their pilot payment. What we would like the city to do is we would like them to work with community residents to get a Northeastern to pay their back payments. Since its own president, Joseph Ayun, led the task force that promulgated the pilot policy in 2012 and strengthened the pilot program as outlined in the memo provided to the councilors in the meeting in August. And one additional proposal that we have is the luxury real estate tax. And we at Maha support that and are thankful to Councilor Edwards for bringing that up in her workshop last week. To sum up quickly, let's move on linkage now. Let's move quickly to determine the maximum amount of level of affordable, achievable and new construction and housing in different neighborhoods, and get a study done that's transparent for all of not only the council, but the residents of Boston to know that, so we can have faith in it, and we strongly support the luxury tax. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. My name is Michael Kane. I'm a tenant organizer. I live at 43 Glen Road, which is next to Franklin Park, not too far from the Shattuck Hospital. And we've organized tenants. I work at the Mass Alliance of HUD Tenants. You've heard several people refer to it tonight. Several tenants are here from buildings that we've saved as affordable housing through tenant organizing. Overall, we've saved about 12,500 statewide, and I added it up. We do have a list, Counselor, of we got from CDAC of the units in your district. It's a little bigger than the one that Sheila mentioned. According to CDAC in District 7, there are 15,739 apartments that are subsidized by the federal government and state government, but privately owned. And the contracts in those buildings have term limits, and at certain points they can get out of those contracts. So we have lost, in the last 20 years, about 1,232 apartments in District 7 converted to market. Those are the ones that we lost. But we saved, through our efforts, about 4,100, kind of one building at a time since 1983. The problem is that some of those extensions, like Juanita McCoy from Elm Hill, and right next to it is Blue Mountain. We're talking 600 apartments right in the middle of Grove Hall. Well, we got those extended in 1985 for 20 years, and then another 15, and another 15 years, and then another 10 after that. But they're coming up in about 4 or 5 more years. We stopped Harold Brown. His bank was going to finance the purchase of 4,000 apartments in Grove Hall in the 80s. We stopped that, but here we are 40 years later. We said then, if Brown had gotten hold of it, forget affordable housing in Roxbury. We stopped that, but now here we are again. And I got a call yesterday from a tenant at Blue Mountain, and she said the bank has foreclosed on the property, so that the bank holds it. We don't even know what that means yet. But that's 230 apartments right in the middle of Grove Hall. So that's kind of one building at a time. We're about to save, we believe, Concord House in the south end, 180 apartments right on Tremont Street. We're going to save 172 as permanently affordable housing, we're pretty sure. And we're about to save, we think, 80 apartments where Karina lives in Highland Park that are very much at risk. There's a preservation buyer. But it's kind of one building at a time. What would be helpful is if we could get legislation passed that the City Council has supported for 20 years, a home rule petition at the State House, which, if passed, would allow the city to require owners to renew their contracts and rent control buildings like these 13A buildings where the mortgages end. There are 2 in your district, Counselor, Newcastle, Saranac, and the Chester, where if we don't get something, those tenants will be out in the street. They're not eligible for federal subsidies. But that's, so that home rule petition would be helpful. The City of Boston has filed it, or actually I shouldn't say they filed it. The mayor has signed it, but he has not lifted a finger to lobby at the State House. In fact, they've undercut our lobbying. It would be nice if the city would support our lobbying effort and actually fight for this bill at the State House, where it dies every 2 years. But that's one thing I wanted to talk about. The other is the need for a new low-income rent subsidy to supplement the federal Section 8 money. We've been fighting it in Washington, and it's a losing battle. They've been cutting Section 8 about 5 years ago. They've stabilized it, but Trump wants to phase it out over the next 10 years. So that is a problem. That's 13,500 apartments in Boston. So we've joined forces with peace groups to fight those cuts and to say that they should cut the military budget and tax the rich and expand that, but that's going to be a hard slog. But what we can do is supplement it here in Boston. And I really want to cite a few numbers on this. The city's housing plan, the mayor's housing plan, calls for 69,000 new apartments by 2030. Of those, they identify 21,000 extremely low-income people, people less than 30% of the median, which is more than half of the renters in Roxbury. More than half of the people in Roxbury make less than $25,000 a year. That is that cutoff. Well, the city of Boston, in the last 4 years, has built only 639 apartments in the mayor's housing plan for those families. 639 out of a need they identify as 21,000. Those are low-income people that are not in subsidized housing. They're out in the city.
You can just finish your thoughts
okay.
on this and then.
So there's a big gap there in terms of the amount of low-income housing the city's actually building. In contrast, the city has rushed to build these 1,800 luxury condos that are sold for people in foreign countries. They've built those $3 million condos, and we researched it. There's another 5,100 luxury condos that are identified in the IPS report and others that we found that are in the pipeline. And these are going to sell for an average of $3 million. They're not for us. They're not for us. So, I mean, we'd be better off without them because they drive up the rents and the housing prices, right? Everybody sees that except the Department of Neighborhood Development. But that's the problem. The positive side is they are generating a huge amount of tax revenue. $57 million is what those 1,800 apartments are already generating. The 5,100 will generate $101 million in new property tax revenue over the next 3 years. $101 million. That is enough to subsidize 10,000 extremely low-income people, like the people in Roxbury, in new construction, double the amount of housing in the Reclaim Roxbury goals, double it. You could save all the expiring use buildings. We could help the BHA save those apartments that Bill McGonigal was talking about. And we could end homelessness in the city with 10,000 low-income apartments. So this is not taking anything out of any city agency now. We're looking at the new future property tax revenues. The mayor can do this, does not need an ordinance, does not need a state legislative approval. It's up to the mayor. We have proposed an ordinance that we would like the council to consider to create a program that the mayor would then have to decide about funding. And we really appreciate the leadership of Councilor Wu and Zakem and Councilor Janey in supporting a letter that 10 councilors have signed supporting at least a pilot program to this end. But we think we tried that 3 years, it hasn't gone anywhere. Let's file an ordinance, get a vote on it, have a hearing, all of you should come, and let's demand that these luxury condos pay something back to keep us in our homes rather than simply pocketing the money and paying this money to the city that we aren't seeing in new low-income housing.
Thank you. Going back to public testimony, I have Bridget Wallace, Joe Tackby, and I think Cheryl Cantone.
And Bridget, before you go, just want to acknowledge that Representative-elect Liz Miranda is here, or was here. There she is. Thank you.
Hi. So I have Bridget, Joe. Is Joe here? Cheryl. Okay. Then I'm going to go and call Linda Freeman. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Bridget Wallace. I purchased a home in Roxbury on Hutchinson Street, so I'm familiar with what is happening and taking place in our community. But I wanted to just highlight two things. One, what comes with gentrification is a rebranding and remarketing of communities and neighborhoods. And this was discussed at the recent Roxbury Master Plan Oversight Committee meeting, in which the new Melnia Cass Hotel was advertised as an extension of downtown, an extension of the South End. and they did not, the hotel is fighting against having the name Melnia Cast placed on the hotel. And so these are the things and the types of things that enforce and reinforce that they are moving us out because we are disposable. But we're here to tell them that we're not, because we're not leaving. And I want to encourage folks in the audience to not sell, to not be forced out, to not buy into those marketing messages that tells us our community is unsafe, but for other people, this is a growing community and you should be here. And then the second point quickly is around community benefits. And I think you, Councilor Janey, talked about the windfall that developers get. And to look at community benefits, and maybe we can put in the ask that we ask for a floor of the market rate rents to go into the Roxbury Trust, where we have a governing over giving those funds to helping people purchase homes, start small businesses, and reinvest those funds back into the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Cheryl Antoine. I am a resident of Roxbury and a member of Reclaim Roxbury. I'm grateful for the opportunity just to share briefly my concern on gentrification and displacement in Roxbury. I wanted to thank Councilor Janey for initiating this and for all of those that supported and stood by coming together to have this evening. As a resident of Roxbury, I am witnessing numbers of my friends being forced out of their units, a promise by landlords and others that once their units are done over, that they would be able to move back in. That is not happening. They are not being able to move back into their homes. As a member of Reclaim, I am also sharing the concern around guidelines for development. And the first committee that was here, the gentleman said that homes in Roxbury are affordable. Absolutely not. Unaffordable for most of all Roxbury residents, and that's people that are brown and people that are black. We are not being able to live in our community. I'm looking around, I'm seeing mom and pa's business being forced out of the neighborhood. Reclaim Roxbury have been engaging with other community groups, and some of which Rep. Tyler mentioned, and many of them we have met over the last year and a half, including the People's Progressive Movement of Chinatown. We all had conversations. And within this conversation, what we are asking the city do, and I'm only going to list a few, to have a real transparency around models that show how 100% affordability can be attained. Models with different assumptions of the same affordability. Models of how developers are getting money back. You got to show us. You can't just say this is a number here and a number there. We also want to see models that include DND funding, MRVP 811, Section 8 citywide vouchers, financing, and additional funding. Show us. Don't tell us you're doing this. We want to see it. We want to see how it's being done. Models of rent-to-own programs, policies that support people moving in from rental units into home ownership, which already has been stated. Models of community land trusts, co-op, transferring ownership back to residents. We live in the city. It's a public land. It belongs to the resident. And last but not least, models of development that are environmentally sustainable, and that's a whole nother conversation. The conversation has to include the people that are in this room, how we can do it together, not the city saying this is what we need to do. You got to include us. We're meeting at neighborhood associations, talking about solutions. We have the solutions. They can't just make the decision, and we are not a part of that decision. We live in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman? Linda Freeman, Ms. Freeman?
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Councilor Janey, Councilor Edwards, and Councilor Wu, and our panel. I am a resident in Roxbury in the Highland Park section. Surprise for some and surprise not for others who are quite familiar of me advocating throughout Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan. And at times I'm in JP as well. So everyone has reiterated time and time again of the need for the affordable housing. Me too. I watch in despair, listening to seniors with the anxiety level of whether they're going to be able to stay where they're in their homes or they're going to get put out because of the rising costs. Why do they have to make a choice between prescriptions, the utilities, and how they're going to feed themselves? So when you have that anxiety level, you're hurting a lot of people that are the backbone of Roxbury and throughout all our neighborhoods. They are our advocates, they are our activists. They built this place. They built every bit of it. And all I can tell them is thank you, because I wouldn't even be able to be here at all. Thank you.
Shannon Booker, Lavette, Connie, Connie Forbes. We have three.
Did you call it Joe?
I did call Joe.
Okay, that's me. Should I go?
Go ahead, but we're gonna, if you could be a little faster because we're trying to get through folks.
Okay. So my name is Joe. I'm a resident of Roxbury, and I also organize with Reclaim Roxbury. So over the past 2 years, I've attended a lot of BPDA public meetings about both Plan Dudley and Plan Glover's Corner, which are development planning processes in Dorchester and Roxbury, which we all know are two main targets of predatory development. And at every single one of those meetings, whether the housing was the official topic or not, residents in attendance brought up concerns about affordable housing. And in response, BPDA representatives referenced the same common scapegoat, which is feasibility. They'll reference all the fancy economic calculations they've done and might say that we can require 13% of housing to be quote-unquote affordable, or maybe 20% if we build really tiny units or really tall buildings. But anything more than that just isn't feasible. And this bothers me because they mislead people by pretending that this restriction is because of some unbendable economic law. But the real problem is that their top priority is guaranteeing that developers make a certain level of profit, and too much affordable housing makes that goal infeasible. Everything else, including ensuring that everyone has a roof over their head, is secondary. And they aren't transparent about that. So ultimately, working class people, poor people, people of color are asked to make the greatest sacrifices and face the greatest harm. But developers aren't asked to make those kinds of sacrifices. They make millions of dollars off all of our struggles. The Boston Police and their enormous budget aren't asked to make those kinds of sacrifices. Corporations, universities, and other powerful institutions aren't asked to make those kinds of sacrifices. And that needs to change. Combating gentrification and guaranteeing a home for everybody needs to be the top priority. And once that happens, we'll start seeing more creative proposals. But we need to organize within our communities to make that happen, because developers won't sacrifice their profits happily, and these city institutions don't work in our favor, as we heard them testify earlier. The city improvements in Plan Dudley that the city officials mentioned earlier are a response to pressure caused by community organizing. But it's not good enough yet, and we need to keep building community power and pushing harder. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had Shannon Booker.
How are you? Yes, my name is Shannon Booker, also known as Khadijah Muhammad. Gentrification and displacement. Well, I've just been displaced. I had a Section 8 for a year because I have a disabled son. And I was initially paying $2,600 a month up in Hyde Park. And what happened was racism, racism, racism. I had two characters put on my door, nigga gotta go. And I'm gonna say just how it came. I had to go, nigga gotta go. My son's wheelchair was broken, all types of things took place. I reported to BHA, reported it to lawyers, everyone. I even called the mayor's office on it. And what ended up happening is because out of fear, and I am a survivor of domestic violence, you know, I packed up, and my housing advocate first told me to leave. So I packed up, put my stuff in storage, thinking that me and my disabled son, who has 8 disabilities, would be safe, and that we would have our Section 8. Well, I've had to displace my son all the way down to Fall River, which costs me almost $200 every time I go to visit him in a brain institution. Every time I go to visit him, and then I'm trying to find housing, and I've been displaced into Brockton. They call it Brockton, because it's broke. Brockton, I don't know a damn soul there, and I'm afraid, because I'm from Roxbury. My grandmother's here, who's just gone blind. She's a pioneer of this community. She walked to her soul's wear off on the bottom of her shoes. She's an activist, Sonia Booker. Many of you all know her, okay? And I have to go to Brockton with the hopes that she'll be okay, because she just lost her vision. Someone's got to take care of her, and I come from a family that's close-knit. I don't want to be in Brockton. I'm hoping that the place gets taken care of, but I'm not going nowhere. They can have that place just so I don't lose my Section 8, but I'm going to remain here fighting for the fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Lavette?
Hello, my name's Lavette, and I'm the president of the Mount Pleasant Forest and Vine Neighborhood Association, and I stand in coalition with RNC, with Reclaim Roxbury, and with all the other neighborhood associations, especially Graverson Charter and Path Forward. I just wanted to say that this format, I thank you very much for having it in Roxbury, but the format has to change, because I feel like the city agencies should speak last or either respond in writing afterwards, because this ensures that you're not going to hear everyone's voice when you do it in this format. Okay, so my testimony, I'll start with it right now. The feeding frenzy, tethered by insatiable greed in Roxbury that we are witnessing, is surely going to be a fight of good over evil. We in Roxbury are witnessing a similar set of injustices occurring in Black and brown neighborhoods all over the country. In 2018, we are still dealing with the ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internal impacts of racism, as made evident in the case studies that I have here for you today that have been compiled by neighborhood associations, and I have 15 copies here for you. The legacy of racist practices like redlining has brought our communities to this place that has provided no access to finances to fix our neighborhoods. Now we are battling outside developers, international investors, real estate salespeople who are operating as spotters for developers, while the people and agencies that are created to protect us assist in the disrespect for those who suffer in a part of Boston that has been intentionally neglected. In my neighborhood, there have been some questionable practices under the receivership program that took a private property into ownership on our street. The developer requested to demolish a building in our historic part of Roxbury without ever attending a neighborhood association meeting, and has yet to come to any neighborhood association meeting. The request for demolition went into the commenting period without informing the residents, and luckily, myself and an abutter and the president of Path Forward went to the Landmarks Commission, and we were able to avert it. Why do residents have to put developers on notice? Is that our job? I don't believe it's our job. So I believe that we should have some standards for all developers that do come into our neighborhood. We've developed one for our neighborhood association. We want transparency, track record of ethical practices, mutual care and respect for us, ethical and responsible development, consider the factors that may impact the community negatively, contact, collaborate, and provide community benefits to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Ms. Forbes, Ms. Connie Forbes. Hi, my name is Connie Forbes. I was going to speak on behalf of Garrison Trotter, but since President Elisa is here, he will take my place.
I'm so sorry. We're going to move through the list. We're going to move
Garrison
through the list.
Trotter
60 people are signed up to speak.
Garrison Trotter is speaking. This is a president speaking on my behalf for our organization.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you for your tolerance. My name is Louis Elisa. I live at 68 Seaver Street, Madam Chairperson, Counselor of the elected representatives and distinguished members of the community. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you our thoughts and ideas on this very volatile and engaging subject, given that the trend towards moving working class and poor people out of their homes and neighborhoods through the unscrupulous and deceptive means is a trend that has gripped so many major urban centers in the nation. And like most trends of any nature, it has taken the time to impact or influence Boston, but now it is here. And like other plagues which have crippled society, this one is leaving much pain and suffering in its wake. There is little doubt that from the time that the Boston Housing Authority back in the 80s began throwing the residents out of Columbia Point and gave over the escrow funds that should have been used to fix up and repair the development versus happening to a private for-profit corporation, the movement to displace and remove working class poor citizens out of this fair city have fully begun. Since that frightful beginning, the city of Boston and its agents have done their best to destroy and minimize opportunities for working residents and find decent, safe, and affordable housing. One could see from the trend over the past 20 years, whereby the city invested more than $20 billion of our collective tax dollars in development and investment of the urban renewal money in the seaport area of Boston, while giving a pittance of that money to the communities of Roxbury and Dorchester. There was no intention to make equitable or fair the opportunities for progress to all the residents of the city. We, the residents of Roxbury, have been under siege from the crime, unscrupulous landlords and corporations that care little or nothing for those who have spent their lives in this city, raising families and making Boston the world-class city that they brag so much about. We have received little or nothing to upgrade and maintain the communities and schools, social programs, and parks. Access to opportunity, jobs, affordable home ownership, entertainment, and effective public transportation has been almost non-existent. Now, with the demand for housing that is closer to the city center, accessible to public transportation, and convenient to those who chose to move and abandon the inner city years ago, and convenient to new employment opportunities that are not made available to the residents of the city, the prospects of those of us who weathered the storm of neglect and disrespect are being pushed out through unscrupulous means, which are being ignored in some cases and supported in other cases with those who are supposed to work on behalf of our citizens, families, and neighbors. As president of one of the oldest neighborhood associations in the city of Boston, Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association, I'm here tonight to ask whether or not the elected representatives of our city are willing to work with us as a community to assure that the senior working class residents and poor people in our community can count on you for support and assistance against the direct attack on our quality of life by unscrupulous developers, lending agents, and large-scale institutions. Unprecedented loss of public access to playgrounds and recreation for our children and seniors has occurred in our community without a word of protest or information from anyone. The wholesale turnover Carter Playground, depriving hundreds of residents in Lower Roxbury, has occurred, and we have yet to know the reason why. Threats to take away even more open space in parkland and Franklin Park is being discussed in the neighborhoods of Roxbury and are not even allowed, Roxbury residents are not allowed at the table. Developers are seeking to add more than 300 units of housing to an already overcrowded neighborhood, offering little or no relief from the traffic congestion and other designs and environmental externalities. Yet no word of support or assistance can be heard. instead of receiving support and backing to ensure that the laws of the Commonwealth and the ordinance of the City of Boston are being observed and followed for the benefit of our residents, some city agencies, commissions, and boards and their agents are giving aid and support through waivers and zoning relief to those various individuals, companies, and institutions violating and undermining the quality of life for our communities and neighborhoods. Therefore, we are here tonight supporting the efforts to invoke a moratorium on large-scale building and development in Greater Roxbury area until a comprehensive process clearly spelling out the specifics by which development is to take place is established and agreed to by its residents that will ensure a conscious and respectful growth of the and strengthening of our community and support the fabric of communities and families for which we have worked so diligently and struggled mightily for more than 60 plus years to create and maintain. I appreciate your support, but I await your response. Thank you.
I have Louise Baxter, David Williams. Sorry. Miss Baxter, David Williams. I also have a Catherine Williams. Those three names. All right. Are you Miss Baxter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I support Reclaim Roxbury and Roxbury's effort to. I support Reclaim Roxbury and Roxbury's effort to stop displacement, and I hope they do better than South Boston did, and stopping it. And also, I'll say, when you talk about communication, the mayor's liaison in South Boston, when there's a project coming up, he fires the abutters, and he has a weekly email newsletter. And I worked with homeless families, and I saw loads of people being put out into areas with no public transit. And I encourage people not to fall for the market hype and don't sell their houses.
Thank you. David Williams? Is it David Williams?
Not here.
Are you
Catherine Williams.
Catherine Williams? And then I'll also call up Bianca. I think I have Welsh? Bianca Welsh.
Hi, I'm Catherine Williams. I live on St. James Street, and I'd like to speak as a member of Tommy's Rock Neighborhood Association. I'd like to tell you the story of two developers that we're trying to deal with in our neighborhood. One is associated with 41 Regent Street, the Daryl Settles Group, and the other is the Regent Development Group, Regent Development that is dealing with 125 Warren Street. We have been trying for 2 years to deal with these two developers and to try and arrange for something reasonable to happen in our neighborhood in terms of affordable housing for our community and also transportation issues. The first 41 Regent Street, we had only had 2 contacts from this developer. The first was a BPDA meeting where most of the abutters were not informed about the meeting, and the new neighborhood were not informed about the meeting. It came at very short notice, and this is dealing with public land, so that's why BPDA was involved with this particular property. They want to put 14 units, all rental units, all not affordable on this very, very small property that's going to create a lot of really serious transportation issues in our neighborhood. And so we had the one meeting, and then the neighborhood association, Tommy's Rock Neighborhood Association, tried to have a serious conversation with the developer and the members of our association. And so we had a meeting, and then after that, nothing was, we were informed of nothing else happening, even with a lot of communication with BPDA, City Council, the community representative, and in the end, it went through the Zoning Board of Appeal, and all of the ridiculous variances that were requested were approved, and the city, Councilor Janey, other people all said that there were no concerns in the community, and we had all expressed, all of the neighborhood had expressed a great deal of concern about the community.
Did not comment on that. Be accurate in your testimony.
I thought there was something in the ZBA saying that you had supported this particular. I'll check into that. Okay. The other one is the one 125 Warren Street. The developer, I just wanted to say, the developer, Regent Development, has been working with us, trying very hard to make sure he listens to our concerns. And we are actually, he has gone from wanting to put 42 units on a very small 6-story building on a very small property at Warren and Regent Street to actually reducing it significantly to 28 units and only 4 levels. And we haven't started the discussion about the affordable housing, but it's something that is very important, and the transportation issues. So what I would ask you is to try and help improve the process for the community associations when we are trying to deal with these developers. They are not listening to us very well. We were lucky with Regent Development because they are very good, and it was an individual, I think, that is leading us that was quite supportive. And so I think there are transportation issues, traffic, the transportation plans that we've been asking for a long time haven't been adhered to. We need a Roxbury transportation plan. We need more, the BPDA to do more in terms of making sure the community is involved in all these discussions and we get adequate notice. Thank you.
James Rayner. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bianca Welsh, and I'm here today speaking on behalf of my sisters. They had to move into a home on Eustis Street on an emergency basis with roommates. Their total rent is $3,200. Now, their landlord is a Japanese man who has never been into this country, so they all of their business is handled through a third-party rent, I don't know what to call it, real estate person. But my concerns are that they've only lived in this house for about a month and a half, and they're having all of these problems, but they have to pay this absurd amount of money split between the 4 of them. So my question to the panel is, what is being done to make sure that these new people coming in and buying homes aren't just slapping makeup on a pig, just, doing all these basic renovations so it looks nice, but then you get in and there's all these problems? Thank you.
Thank you. James Rayner. Lucille Jones. I have E. Robles. Any of those names? Okay, moving on. I have B. Sharab. L.E.J. Carty, or Lawrence Carty. Reverend Willie Broderick. Lorraine Wheeler. And I have Betty Lowe. Step forward, state your name.
Hello, my name is Alex Ponte Capellan, community organizer with City Life Vida Urbana. Lawrence was supposed to write my name down, but he wrote himself down. But anyways, he wrote himself for me, so that's why I'm here. I wanted to thank Roxbury for coming out and making this issue one of the issues that is, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for y'all. And I want to thank you guys for listening to us and having this meeting. And I wanted to thank the city for starting on some of the things that, impact us, like the speculation working hearing and this hearing here. It's all moving towards the right direction. So yeah, I have a comment, suggestion, and a few questions. So my comment was about the acquisition program that the city has. I wanted to ask the panel from the city, but they're not here anymore. So I guess I'll just ask you guys. Well, this is really just a comment. The program is to buy buildings that are on the, private market, and to make sure they stay affordable. And we want to focus on buildings where we're seeing problems. But the problem is the CDCs aren't buying triple deckers in the areas where we're seeing problems. They prioritize buildings that have 30 units or more. And the buildings where we see problems that are 30 units or more are owned by really bad actors, and they're not going to sell to a CDC for the price where we can see affordable housing. So it's a good idea, but we need other things working at the same time for it to actually work. So we had a working hearing last week on speculation that you guys had, but we really need to see these ideas that we're talking about happen quickly, because the problem is happening now. People are being evicted now. So these ideas like speculation tax and all these other stuff, we need to start seeing proposals and really start moving quickly. Another suggestion was rent control in planning areas. We've already mentioned it tons of times. That's my suggestion personally. I think we need to see rent control or rent stabilization or whatever you want to call it. And lastly, I had a question about the affordable housing. It was mentioned earlier that there's certain barriers for people when they're applying for housing. So the affordable housing process, for you to get affordable housing, you won't have to pass the building's management, whatever their process is to approve somebody, and then you have to go through the BPDA process, and that's query checks, there's background checks, there's credit checks, and all that stuff. So I'm curious to know, what do the demographics look like of the folks that actually live in affordable housing in Boston? And I know that you got the BPDA might have that data, because in the application there's a page where you ask for the demographics of the folks living there. So I'd like to know, what does the demographic of the people that actually live in affordable housing look like? And the other thing is a question for you guys directly. Do you guys support some sort of rent regulation for households that need it? And I'd like to hear an answer from each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
An answer now.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Wheeler, and I'm here on behalf of the Roxbury Path Forward Neighborhood Association. And I'm here to talk about a project on Moreland Street, which is where I live. And this project went before the Zoning Board of Appeal, and on May 22nd, the Zoning Board of Appeal granted 6 variances to the developer of the project, despite the opposition of abutters and other residents. There was tremendous opposition to the proposal at 63 Moreland Street, because the lot is zoned for 5 units in 2 buildings, and that is what the buyer of the property wrote to the seller who owns the house next door when he wanted to purchase the property. But after he received the deed to the property, he applied for variances to build 8 units, which is more than the lot is zoned for. So there were 63 signatures on a petition. There were at least 40 letters, which consisted of neighborhood letters, calls to the mayor's office. There were Mount Pleasant Avenue Neighborhood Association, Roxbury Path Forward Neighborhood Association, all in opposition to this project. And yet, District 7 City Councilor Kim Janey and the rest of the City Council all approved the project. as did the mayor's office. And so what we're really asking for when we talk about these projects is how can the city council hold the zoning of appeals responsible for following Article 50? Community residents believe that the developer really had help from the city, help that neighborhood residents who, you know, own property in that neighborhood do not receive, and that a home is really the most expensive item that most most individuals own. And we really see that despite lip service, that the city wants to have working class residents and the city wants to have middle income residents, yet they're really feeling steamrolled by the process. So we joined the Roxbury Neighborhood Council in asking that because there was overwhelming opposition to this project, we really joined the Roxbury Neighborhood Council in asking that the city council look for a way to rescind the approval that was given to this developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lowe?
My name is Betty Lowe. I am a lifelong resident of Greater Boston. I started life in Chinatown. My parents bought and now own a home in Medford, and I currently rent in Quincy. As I stand to inherit that generational wealth, I am but a witness to the widening inequality and the economic pain in Boston and in Roxbury. Housing is a basic human right, and the lack of access to it is an affront to human dignity. I have been to council meetings at both Medford City Hall and at Boston City Hall, and I have seen aggressive apathy and a lack of action in good faith on the part of our elected leaders when it comes to protecting their most vulnerable constituents. I mean, do we really just see a pushback on a development moratorium in Roxbury from the mayor's office when that is what multiple residents have specifically called for? The residents are left to organize and fight for themselves. So if that's how it must be, I want to help you all fight back. Please help me. Please join me, everyone. Please join me this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Prince Hall in Dorchester, 24 Washington Street, for a community meeting in support of a city ordinance to provide access to high-quality permanent jobs to women, Black and brown residents, and low-income residents of Boston, and in particular of Roxbury, with oversight by the very people that have been closest to the pain. Former City Councilor Chuck Turner is here. I've been helping him and his community coalition out with this event. It's this Saturday at Prince Hall. Please take one of our flyers from the table just outside of this room in English and in Spanish. Please join us. Thank you.
The handwriting is a little unclear, but I have Alonza Michael. Juanita McCoy. Okay, and then Sharon. Marjorie's in here. Kiash. What is it? Keisha? Hartfield? I don't know. If I don't get a last name. Okay. Reclaim Roxbury. But okay. Luis. Okay. And Frezia Herrera? Okay. Eric Estevez? Joyce Lawrence? Sherilyn Jones? Eric is here? Okay. And Pastor Broderick is here? Okay, those three.
Yes, good evening. My name is Frezia Herrera, and I'm requesting that next time they do a jury, they have to call frost the testimonies, because this is not right to have all these people that they have been waiting for all night, and they send us to the last minute, and we need to hear from the government, City Hall. They need to be here, hearing us. I'm a tenant of Roxbury Community College. Roxbury, 435 Walnut Avenue. I have been living there 9 years. And they sold the building in 2013. Who bought the building is CRM. And I have been fighting for them since then. I continue fighting with them, with the lawyers, at City Life. Thanks to them, Vida Urbana, they have been helping me. City Life is the best. But unfortunately, they cannot help me now. Because they told me, we don't want you there anymore. You have to leave. Because I cannot pay what they're asking me. I can pay, but I'm not continuing paying them every single year, going up $100, $200, $300, $400, now $1,000. This is not okay. It's not that I'm not able to pay, I can pay. But because, and also I couldn't continue fighting, they are suing me because I have to pay the money that I did not pay of the rent that they're asking me. And this is not fair. And I'm looking for justice and fighting for Latino community. We are fighting for people of color in our place, Roxbury, and we don't want it leave. Unfortunately, I have to leave next year, July 31st. But I'm continuing fighting for the people who are being evicted every single minute. It's not every day, it's every single minute. And we have to really take on consideration of the people who are being their citizen and making a difference in our community, not the people who has a lot of money and they're greedy and they want to take us all this money that they say that we have, but we don't have. But we are human beings, so they need to respect us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eric Esteves. I'm a former renter and current homeowner. I had some comments and questions that I wanted to pose to the city reps, but I'll just submit my written testimony. So some of the things I wanted to say is that I think building more only makes sense if it's also paired with a regional strategy when it comes to affordable housing and zoning regulations. I think our neighboring towns benefit from the proximity to Boston, but just like the way we were able to calculate pilot rates for tax-exempt institutions, there's a way that we should be able to leverage the impact of the city on the metro region because of how the tax base has shifted and doesn't match our daytime workforce compared to other cities. At the micro and macro level, I think for renters and homeowners, I'm curious what the city is doing to redefine how AMI, area median income, is calculated for city-owned property so that it more closely matches city incomes versus incomes in the metro area. When it comes to unfair burdens on affordable housing being in mostly Black and Latino communities, I think the inclusionary development policy, I think we should eliminate the ability for developers to opt out of paying and actually start mandating on-site affordable housing in all of the luxury development going forward. I think also that the city, I'm curious whether the city is exploring ways that the long-term perpetuity clauses for Section 8 and other similar properties are truly permanently affordable, and in what ways can there be more clauses put in place so that when the long-term leases or the 99-year leases expire, there is no option to then shift whether those are affordable or not. Lastly, another thing in terms of is more around development, but with the monitoring of development projects in accordance with the BRJP, I still don't feel that there's enough enforcement of penalties and consequences, and I think that that's something that the city should really push towards actually enforcing those penalties and consequences, and then those fines that are collected from those non-compliant or firms that are in violation could then also go into the pool for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to also recognize former City Councilor Tito Jackson is also here. And Reverend, I'm sorry. Yes, I had Reverend, were you gonna? Okay.
So you can go ahead. Go ahead. Good evening. My name is Cheryl Lynn Jones. I'm a resident of Roxbury for the past 6 years. I have a 40-year-old son.
He works in the Boston school system. He coaches numerous teams in the city, knows all the kids, a small business owner, and I have a grandson who's 13 years old, who, when I talked to him the other day, was so wistful, just wish his father could find a home to buy. He should be able to. He works, he contributes, and I don't understand how, knowing the history of housing, this is not a new phenomenon that we are dealing with right now. It's happened time and time and time again. I bought a house from NACA. What is NACA? That's about the same thing that we're dealing with right now. So what I don't understand is how we use the same approach to solve the same problem when we know how. I don't see how we don't know how to fix this. The solutions never really seem to be centered around the affected. They're anecdotal. Black women lost their homes in historic numbers in this last crisis. But where are they? I don't see them necessarily at the table when it comes time to remedy this situation. And really, it enrages me. It really does. I lived in Boston, in DC for 10 years, came back in 2012. And I was just so angry riding through the city, seeing how much it has changed, seeing the same story play itself out again right here in my hometown. You know, I feel like I live here. I know people who wouldn't be caught dead in Roxbury 10 years ago. Not a problem. And now they say Roxbury, and I'm confused. This is just how crazy the situation is. And so it seems to me that just like I look in this room and I see mostly people of color, as if we're the only ones that care about this thing. So I see the same thing when I ran through the city, and I don't see any brothers or sisters on the job when it comes to all this construction. I think that if we had that type of situation where you're not just a victim, you actually have skin in the game, you have money, you can actually buy one of these houses that you're help building. I just don't understand how we can be so completely cut out of our own city without there being any solutions. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Okay, we'll make housing for 600 or 700. I looked at the sign out there, 1,500 new homes, 68% are market and luxury. What is market rate today? $2,200, $2,500. My own landlord, who I know, I was paying $900. Not a lot of money here, but not pennies either. Just like that, $400 a month. And actually, he'd have a nerve to think he's doing me a favor because that's under the market. This is crazy, and it's not going to be fixed by sound bites. It's not going to be fixed by the same solution. If you don't have these people here at the table, and this is where all the ideas are, we're just playing games. This is how I feel. Well, I'm willing to fight to make it right. I'm willing to fight for my grandson to have a home to live in, but I'm not with the games. I'm just not. Now, if you're serious about wanting to help these people, it's easy to do. It's very easy to do. They got people with PhDs all over the world that study what happened and what can be done to remedy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. First, I want to thank you all, to Councilor Edwards, Councilor Janney, Councilor Wu. I apologize for stepping out. I had to go teach a Bible study class, but I'm glad you all are still here. My name is Reverend Willie Bodger II. I serve as the Associate Pastor of the Historic 12 Baptist Church, and my wife is a physician at Boston Medical Center, but I am here today as a proud Roxbury resident where I live on Moreland Street. I'm here to voice my concerns about gentrification and displacement here in our community. This conversation, as aforementioned, is not a new one. However, we have all felt the angst and anxiety that current prices of new development have placed on each and every one of our residents. As for many who are present today, I don't think we are all anti-development, but we are pro-community, which means that responsible development includes each and every one of us. According to the Imagine Boston 2030 report, housing prices rose 70% between 2010 and 2015. These are dramatic price increases that have had a disparate impact on low-income renters and potential home buyers like me and my wife. But we are at the close of 2018, which means for far too long, the focus has not been on the residents and small business owners that are in this community, but they have been focused on producing a housing stock, or more simply, housing availability without our community in mind. If this community was really considered, then the plans to build would take into account that the median household income is $34,600. If our community was really taken into consideration, then the city would acknowledge and accommodate the fact that the average household median net worth for an African American family is $8 compared to white households, which is $247,500. If our community was really taken seriously, we would look at the cultural erasure of our community and see that it is directly connected to the pricing of the homes in this neighborhood. I'm here to consider our community and bring light to these very real issues. I know I have a minute left, and so I want to get to my 5 solutions that I would like to propose to the city to consider on this evening. Number one, I believe the city could consider rezoning particular areas to protect and preserve existing housing and regulate construction of new projects and protect the small business districts. Number two, I hope that the city thinks about creating a strategic land acquisition plan. This would focus on creating a policy that repurposes the surplus land that D&D and the BDPA hold and using these lots to directly create low, moderate, and middle income housing. Number three, I believe that the city should create a collaborative housing investment program. This would allocate family funding for families to come together and use the city's revenue streams to assist families in collectively investing in 2 and 3 family units. This program should also procedurally be assisted by the city to make sure families know how to go through the acquisition process. Number four, I believe the city should implement a tax incentive program that will support good landlords and good developers that are willing to lower rents and maintain rent affordability at a level for the community while also building at rates that are below market to meet the city's bustling demands. And number five, I suggest that the city finally, we support and invest in the incubation of small business owners in our city with capital from our investments as well as from other revenue streams that will have a direct impact on employment in our community and people can actually afford the homes that are being built. I believe that these practical solutions are not a fix-all, but just a part in the process of helping our community really seriously address our housing affordability problem. And I want to close first in closing and last in closing, just thank Councilor Janey for your foresight and your commitment to this community and your willingness to make this an issue that is a part of your platform and being here to make sure that it's here in Roxbury to hear our concerns. I thank you all for your time. I thank you for your commitment tonight to being here with us, and I hope to work closely to help solve this housing affordability problem here in our community. Thank you.
Keith McDermott. Keith McDermott. Angela Page Cook. Angela Page Cook.
Good evening.
I'm going to just call out a couple more names. Mike, I think, Prentice. Mike's here. Okay, it's 2. And then I have Isabel Torres. Isabel Torres? Okay. Rufus Falk. Is Rufus Falk here? He left. Jill Kimmel? Is Jill Kimmel still here? Monica Tapley? Monica Tapley? Monica's here, yes? Okay, great, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So as mentioned, my name is Keith McDermott. I've worked in Roxbury since 1989 at Northeastern, the Reggie Lewis Center. Now I work in Franklin. But first of all, I want to commend you guys for doing this. I think this is very important. This is something that near and dear to my heart. I know we're talking about gentrification. Gentrification is a byproduct of what's happening in this community. It's not so much about, I don't like to break things down into black and white. You know, I like to look at the practical reason of what's going on. When you talk about affordability, people got to have jobs that pays in an equitable way that so they can afford market rate. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to, and I don't want to repeat what people said already because you guys are smart enough to hear it. But my cousin, the late Ken Guscott, I was talking to him when I was working at Northeastern, and he said, when you have all these affordable housing, what you do is you keep people poor. Let's talk about how we can support people to have home ownership. So this affordable housing, let's see how we can come up with a plan where part of their rent could go towards home ownership. Right. Thanks. We need to look at institution. You know, we have an institution here in Roxbury Community College that I will share this with you. Of the 19 presidents, vice president, dean, and directors position, 14 of them were white that replaced black folks. And every single one of the white folks were paid a whole lot more than they paid black people that had those credentials. That's what leads to lack of affordability. So what can we do? We can investigate hiring practices and pay rate for public employees because those are public information. This is what someone gave me, public information, salaries of black folks versus white folks that replace them. We can support business people like Fred Fairfield, who's been here for a long time in Roxbury, never left Roxbury, and continue to support the people of Roxbury. Okay, we can look at a graduated process where home ownership can be achieved through, you know, they pay rent, affordable housing. So then the last but not least, when I was at Northeastern, I worked with Herb Jackson, which is Tito's dad, Council Saunders, Senator Diane Wilkerson, and Gloria Fox. And we looked at how we were compensating people to make sure that they can afford to live in not just affordable housing, but market rate housing. You guys have the skill set to do that with the current state senators and state rep. And if they don't want to work with them, force them to work with you. But you got to support folks. And I'm going to share this with you because it's public information so you can see the breakdown in terms of salary. That's why it's gentrification, because they're getting $10 an hour and other people are getting $20 an hour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Prentice. I am a Roxbury native community organizer. Thank y'all for being here. Thank y'all for making this happen. Real quick, there were so many good points that were brought up around diagnosing the problem, the different ways in which our community is being besieged. And so one point that I kind of want to bring it to is just sort of just naming the sort of implication, the putting the fault back where it belongs in terms of talking about the unaccountability of the BRA or the BPDA. We don't, as residents, as you were there, Councilor Janey, you saw residents in Roxbury were unanimous in their resistance to the Plan Dudley plan as it was iterated in the RFPs that went out. And having anything unanimous in Roxbury is incredible, first off. But you saw that we as a community stood up and said, no, this plan is not ready to go. And the BRA and the oversight committee that is, again, not accountable to the community, still go ahead and push the plan forward. And so the BRA, the BPDA, the Black Person Displacement Agency, continues to be unaccountable to us. And what I want to ask is just what powers does the City Council have to rein them in? Because this is a Roxbury problem now, but this will be a Dorchester problem, and this will be a Mattapan problem if we don't stop this here. And so this new urban renewal that's happening really is taking away one of our last natural resources in Roxbury, our last chance to sort of get the neighborhood and the historic residents. I'm not talking about just the land, I'm talking about the people. And to get them back on track to equity generation and wealth generation. So this is a really last chance. And if the neighborhood's divided, if we're not putting this in alignment with our master plan, if we're not putting this in alignment with the wishes of the community, then our last natural asset shouldn't be disposed of in a rush just because of a hot market. Markets come and go, but Roxbury's weathered through that. And so what I really need to ask is the city council to just tell us, like, be real. Like, do y'all even have any more power over the BPDA? Can y'all tell them to stop? Can y'all tell them they violate their own zoning codes, their own Article 50s, and are unaccountable in creating these city plans? So that's what I really want to know, and I really just want to name the devil in the room. And thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Monica Tapley. I'm a resident of Roxbury, a fairly new resident. I've been here for about 2 years, and it's been alarming to me, really, what the level of gentrification and the level of just blatant disregard that's happening for all parts of the community here. I've lived all over Boston for the past 5 years, coming from Orlando, Florida. I grew up in New York City. I know firsthand what displacement looks like, what the effects of displacement are. My family moved every 2 years from apartment to apartment in New York City. And I'm very proud to be an owner of land here in Roxbury. And I'm here to fight to make sure that what I lived through as a child, my child won't have to go through and my community won't have to go through. Roxbury is a residential and historic community, declared or not. Yet the mayor's office and representatives are not interested in supporting the residents currently living in our area. This is demonstrated by the countless times public land has been taken over by private entities. Developments are intentionally benefiting those who gain financially and at the same time facilitating rent increases. Now, residents, most of them seniors, who have lived in Roxbury for generations, are forced to make untenable decisions. Affordability is not a relative term. Affordability is a relative term. Affordability in Roxbury is not the same as it is in Greater Roxbury. And until the land grab began, Roxbury has simply been a blip on the city's map, not deserving the level of respect that we are due. The vast majority of Roxbury residents are low middle income, and extremely low income households. We were able to secure mortgages and rents at reasonable prices and before the development boom. Over the years, we have invested in making our neighborhoods a place where people know each other, where we know our families, where we're able to come together as a community and where we face struggles together and help each other through those same collective struggles. Because Roxbury is united and Roxbury is resilient. Roxbury's proximity to downtown Boston, many public transportation routes, and neighborhood community feel make it a uniquely special to these types of households. It's undeniable that rents have increased, that the city's standard of living has skyrocketed, and properties for sale rarely go on the market for less than $500,000, even on Copeland Street, where I live. Throughout these changes, Roxbury has provided its residents an opportunity to live close to the places where we work, close to the places where we support businesses, and simply able to live within our means. Throughout these changes, residents from across Boston and short-term renters who temporarily work or study in Boston have realized our neighborhood's unique opportunities. Nonetheless, the current pipeline of development across our neighborhoods will not alleviate the housing crisis our current residents face with the influx of competition for rents and mortgages. The current pipeline solves the housing inconveniences of higher income households that see Roxbury as an ideal short-term rental or investment opportunity, but not as a home. We are faced with a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood at all corners. We are alarmed that our city council, the zoning board, and the BPDA consistently ignore our pressing demands. While we want to see vacant lots developed, we also want to see low middle income, low income, and extremely low income households remain in our neighborhood because Roxbury is our home and should remain our home. Thank you.
Ramona Brown, Samuel Pierce, Mimi Turchnet, Southwest Boston CDC. Mimi. Sophia Trans-Tomar. Marco McWar. Is Marco here? Okay, Marco's here. We're gonna see if Mimi's here. So we have Ramona Brown, Samuel Pierce.
Yes, how are you doing?
Very much.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So I just wanted to start off by thanking you all for having this hearing. And I just wanted to just begin, since this is the birthplace of America, with a little bit of scripture, since we just had a preacher. The first book of Samuel, chapter 12, verses 16 through 17 says, "Now stand there and see great things the Lord is about to do. You know that it does not rain at this time of year during wheat harvest. I will ask the Lord to send thunder and rain today. Then you will realize how wicked you have been in asking the Lord for a king." My first question is why the BHA is selling public housing buildings in favor of luxury condos. When Dr. King Jr. spoke at the same 12th Baptist Church as Reverend Brockton, who previously spoke. Dr. King spoke in the 1960s here in a massive march through Massachusetts Avenue and Tremont Street, long before he ever marched on Washington, D.C. And 60 years ago, we were talking about jobs, education, and housing. And so that's the reason why I'm saying, with all due respect, that this council should be ashamed of itself when we're closing schools and closing public housing. Now, what will Boston look like 5 years from now? Because we're talking about a 5-year plan, but we need to talk about numbers. So 12,623 households times $14,000 on average per household equals $176,722 that the city gets every year just from public housing residents that they themselves pay for the landlord, which is the city. So we can't cry poor anymore because the numbers are there. That $176,722,000 annually times 5 would be $883,610,000 5 years from now in 2022, when hopefully we'll have a new governor, because I'm glad we still have Charlie Baker. But the reason why I say that is because I didn't want to have someone who was playing the violin and singing songs to me and not going to get something done. Now we're going to absolutely have a new governor in 2022, and this is why this new 5-year plan is so important to me. Now, $883 million, just doing the math, 610, plus the $505 million that Michael just mentioned earlier, plus the capital fund of $135 million that this city is going to be getting from HUD, equals $1.5 billion in 5 years. Now, if you were to divide by 5, that would be about $300 million on average every year that this council is guaranteed to get. So we're going to stop pretending like we don't know where the money's going to come from. Now, I'm just asking for 1% of the city's budget, which would be $30 million every year to be spent on low-income housing. So we can do the math later. I can help you all if you need me to. That's not a problem. But there's going to be no more small talk. We're going to just talk about what the numbers mean, because $27 million are already allocated to be spent on public housing by this council. You've already signed off on it in the budget. It used to say, however, though, that only $17 million was going to be spent in 2016 and 2017. So where all of a sudden did the extra $10 million come from? Well, what happened was, we talked to Peter, we talked to Paul, and we said we're not going to get robbed anymore. That's what happened to the other $10 million. So the point is that we need to make sure that, seriously, that we get the $30 million every year for low-income housing, because in this very building where we stand, Mayor Menino was able to find $300 million just by snapping his fingers from the same fund I just quoted from, which is the Public Housing Fund. And now here we are today having this wonderful conversation. Now, the top 5%, as a lady mentioned before, make over $266,000. Now, that, interestingly, is hovering on the median income that they were mentioning over racial disparities, that white families have over $250,000, black families only have $8, which is also pathetic. Because I blame that on this city's education. Because with the right education, we should be able to be sending people to all of the wonderful colleges around Boston. This is not some third world country. This is Boston, Massachusetts. And so because of that, let's look at who already lives here. Because I don't want to be planning ahead for some imaginary group of people when we already have a population here we should be considering.
Thank you.
And the people that currently live here are forced out through renovations. If you don't want me to speak anymore, then that's fine. The numbers are already there. $300 million is already being allocated, coming in through housing revenue, and I would like to see what you all do. Thank you. That's my time. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Before we go to Marco, were we able to get Mimi? No? Okay. Marco, Charlotte, Petilla, and Maxine Matire? Maxence. I apologize. I couldn't read the handwriting. My apologies.
So my name is Marco McWayne. Actually, it's not McGuire, but
my apologies.
I just want to say I lived in Roxbury for about 5 years now, and I also own a studio around the corner from here. I'm an audio engineer. One thing I do want to say is that all I've been hearing tonight was about, like, what can y'all do? What can y'all do? I do feel like in certain aspects, we need to look at what we need to do for ourselves, like what we need to do to look into the mirror. Because we may also talk about gentrification, but I don't want to call it gentrification because I'm not defeated yet. And nah, I'm not going to be. Whoever said that, nah, I'm not going to be. Because you know why? Because I'm educating myself, and people need to know how to read in between the lines. Like, people are sharing information to y'all, and y'all don't want to accept it. It's crazy. Not everybody, because it's like, yo, like, nah, if you, like,
please,
yes,
please
like,
let him speak. Let him speak.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're quick to buy Jordans. We're quick to buy the things that black people are mostly consumed of. And it's just like, if we can really look into like real estate, if we can really look into like stocks and bonds in order to empower ourselves, and sorry, I'm speaking from the heart. I don't even know where all this is coming from. Like, but if we really just look into what we're doing into the mirror and really unify with ourselves. Like, there was a shootout in Jackson Square the other day, and it's just like, bro, like, we're killing ourselves. Like, we need to build and grow together, yo. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Good evening. My name is Charlotte Patilla. I'm a resident here in Roxbury. I have 2 small children and an elderly parent, so I do not have prepared remarks, and I ask you just to indulge me as I go. In full disclosure, I am also a litigant in the appeal of the zoning board's grant of 6 variances concerning the property on Moreland Street. So I'm somewhat circumscribed in what I can discuss tonight. That said, there are 3 points that I'd like to briefly make. One is around elder protection. I strongly urge you, as a matter of practice or as a matter of legislation, to consider disclosure and certification requirements from developers. This is needed to protect our elderly populations who are particularly vulnerable to appeals to sell their property for what appears to be large amounts of money, who are told that certain people will live on a property and certain number of units will be built, when in fact that is not the plan. The second issue I want to raise, and this is in connection with the Zoning Board of Appeal, is that it suffers from bouts of lawlessness. And in order to seek vindication with respect to those bouts of lawlessness, one must appeal to the Superior Court. This is a highly technical process. It requires the skill of an attorney to guide one through it. It is an intimidating process. I will tell you that in this lawsuit, the very first interrogatory propounded to us, the written question propounded to us, was asking for a summary of all of our convictions, as if that had something to do with the lawfulness of the variances granted. For this reason, I ask you to consider enacting legislation that would enable prevailing abutter residents to attorneys' fees and costs, to incentivize members of the bar to take these cases, and to empower people in our community to vindicate their rights in court. Relatedly, with respect to evictions, I strongly urge you, to the extent is within your jurisdiction, to consider fee-shifting statutes for evictions to incentivize members of the bar to take on eviction cases representing tenants in our legal system. If you go to, thank you. If you go to Boston Housing Court on any given eviction day, you will notice that there is a disproportionate number of people of color without representation who must go against attorneys. And it's not fair. There should be some kind of incentive for members of the private bar to take on cases representing people who are without the means to afford private counsel. Thank you very much.
Make sense? Good evening. My name is Maxence Mateer, and I'm a resident of Roxbury. I live on Montrose Street. So much of what is on here and what people have expressed, and many of whom have left, is in here. So I actually want to work backwards a little bit. So some of the things that we are asking for, a few of them Charlotte just mentioned, but also I would like to reiterate the protection of seniors, because typically when gentrification occurs, it's older seniors who have their homes that may need a little bit of work. Maybe their children are all grown up. Maybe they don't live in the community. Maybe they do. And someone comes and flashes a few $100,000, and then pretty much the house is gone, and then overdevelopment and so on and so forth. So we all know that story very well. But I would like to say some of the things that we would like to see occur as a result of the activities of the ZBA. We would like, and we feel that we should have copies of all notes taken by City Council staff and staff from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, that they be shared with the neighborhood associations, and a copy of the messages that staff members are bringing back to councilors about housing projects should be posted and or shared with the neighborhood. We believe that there should be signed conflict of interest disclosure forms for members of committees having an impact on development, so that members are transparent about relationships that they may have. Projects should have a critical threshold of abutter and direct neighborhood support to proceed where variances from the zoning codes are needed for a project. And again, seniors who may be particularly vulnerable to developers' real estate tactics used to get them to sell their properties must have protection from the most aggressive industry practices used in gentrifying neighborhoods. I also want to reiterate another item on here that we would like to see. There should be no disposition of public land until significant anti-displacement measures are taken and the Roxbury Master Plan written in 2004 can be updated. And then more creative application of land use laws. Legal tools should also be used to combat displacement. I know that, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. He mentioned something about a piece of property, but it just kind of went quickly, and I want people to understand the park over by Northeastern has pretty much been given away. Carter Playground, and that's to our dismay. I did wonder what was wrong with the picture when I went to the Jazz Festival. Thank you. And I said, gee, we had a concert stand right over there last year. What's going on with that? But that was just given away without our input, and that's a major tragedy. Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, I will turn it over to Councilor Janey.
Thank you so much. Again, I just want to start by thanking folks again, just as I began with my opening statement. Want to thank Councilor Edwards for your leadership and for helping to make sure that we could hear from folks who are in the room. I want to thank Councilor Wu. Certainly, if you have anything that you want to add, I'm happy to defer. Certainly, our panels, all of the neighborhood associations that are represented here this evening, from all the folks who stayed to the very end. These are complex issues. I'm really grateful for those of you who offered real concrete solutions on things that we can move forward, whether it be through an ordinance, whether it be through home rule petition, whether it be advocacy, through the budget process. These are real important issues where real people's lives are being impacted every single day. In my opening, I talked about my own experience with gentrification and displacement with my family in the South End. We just heard a speaker just now talk about how folks are threatening and approaching our elderly, but certainly all of us. I've got a stack of mailers about this thick from people who are trying to come, and they don't care, and they're asking, they're making cash offers, no inspections, and so we are being preyed upon. But it is important that we stand unified, that we have concrete solutions, that we can move forward to make sure that we can keep our community here in Roxbury for Roxbury residents. And so I'm grateful for all of you, particularly those who stayed through the very end. The hour is late. It is 20 minutes to 10, but this was an important conversation, important that we have it right here and that we stayed and listened to everyone. I want to give my colleagues here an opportunity to make closing statements, and then, again, just thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to be here to thank the sponsors and the chairwoman here. I apologize for missing the first part of the meeting, but I got here right as public testimony starts, so I think in some ways I was here right on time. And what we heard tonight, I just want to reflect back that I am also very sorry that we're not doing enough. We should be doing more, faster, now, and that's on the city, that's on all of us who have the privilege of being in City Hall working day to day. So I wanted to be here until the end to take all that back with us and make sure that we are constantly listening, constantly bringing those solutions back, because we all deserve better as a city. And what we need, you all shared right here in this room. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out here tonight. This was an incredible conversation and one of many we've had throughout the city because the pain is real. I don't know who mentioned it before, but it is not just a black or brown issue. I've seen working class or white folks in Charlestown also feel that they have no longer a place in Boston. It is a question of who we're building for. And I've said that many, many times. No matter how many units we try to throw out there, if it isn't for us, then there's no point in building them. The fact of the matter is, this was an incredible conversation, and the solutions that you have proposed are unique in many ways, and so I'm so glad to come here and learn from you. I agree. I came to your house, and in your house, I felt very welcome. I felt very educated. And I feel that whatever passion is thrown this way, it is only because you love the neighborhood, you love Boston, you love the ability to stay here, and you love social justice. So I just feel more love, no matter how high the voices get, no matter how frustrated folks may feel. And to answer, I think, a couple questions. One, what can we do? The fact of the matter is we're organizing. We're organizing ways to look not just beyond the court system, but how to actually reframe, deconstruct, and look at the BPDA in all different angles. I hope you'll show up at those conversations when we open them up and we talk about how we are going to have to change the system. Because it is, yes, we're going to have to take it project by project, but we all understand this is a systemic question. These are systemic problems that we have inherited through generations that started since redlining to this day. So yes, we are dealing with that, one of the many, many horrible, visceral, disgusting symptoms of racism. And this system needs to be looked at all different angles. So we need to have a systemic conversation as well. I know there's a lot of frustration when it comes to the project by project conversations. The fact of the matter is, As testified by a young woman in East Boston, 90% of the cases that go to court, when people do manage to get them to court, the neighbors, the abutters, they win. So a lot of folks aren't looking at that. So I really appreciate that testimony about how to fee shift and look at ways in which, if we have to go legal, we look at a way in which we comprehensively do so and allow people, regardless of their means, to have a voice in City Hall, but also in the courthouse. I want to say thank you so much for those who stayed here the entire time. I want to say thank you for those who opened up at the very beginning with literally 30 solutions, right? Roxbury created 30 wonderful solutions. This is a great conversation. It will not be for nothing. And you all know we're up for a re-election next year too, and you know how to hold us accountable if you need to. I'm not frightened of that conversation either. So I want to say thank you so much for being out here tonight. Thank you so much for staying, and thank you so much for educating me personally as the Chair of Housing and Community Development. I'm now going to call this hearing to a close.